The small cafe sat on the corner of a busy street, the kind of place most people walked past without paying much attention. Yet inside it carried a warmth that made regular customers come back day after day. The smell of fresh coffee mixing with the sweet scent of baked bread and pastries. The quiet hum of conversation blending with the clinking of cups and spoons. It was simple but alive, and for Emily it was more than just a workplace. It was the place that paid her rent. The place that helped her survive each month. The place where she tried to hide her sadness behind polite smiles. Emily moved between tables with practiced ease, balancing plates and cups, her black apron slightly worn, her shoes carrying the tired marks of long shifts. She had been working here for almost 2 years, and though the pay was little, she held on to the job because it was steady. She needed steady. Life had not been kind since her mother passed away, and she had learned to treasure whatever bit of stability she could find. Still, every morning she walked in with the same thought: today I just need to make it through. Today I need to keep going. Her co-workers often joked with her, calling her the quiet one, because Emily rarely talked about herself. She laughed when they teased her, but inside she carried stories that were too heavy to share. Her mother's laughter, her gentle advice, her favorite songs, and most of all the sapphire and diamond ring her mother never took off. It was the kind of ring that stood out. Not because it was overly large, but because it had character. It was old, the blue stone shining softly as if it held memories of its own. Emily remembered as a little girl holding her mother's hand and tracing the edge of that ring. She remembered her mother saying it had been passed down from her grandmother, and that one day it would be Emily's. But that day never came. Her mother fell ill. Her time ended far too soon, and when Emily went through her belongings afterward, the ring was gone. She asked relatives. She searched the house. She even wondered if it had been stolen while her mother was in the hospital. No answer came, only emptiness. The ring vanished just like her mother's voice, and Emily had learned to live without it. Though every time she thought of her mother, she imagined the ring glowing faintly on her hand, a symbol of love she could no longer touch. Now, years later, Emily had grown used to routine, to mornings that began with the hiss of the coffee machine, to afternoons filled with orders shouted from the kitchen, to evenings when her feet ached so badly she could hardly stand. Yet she kept moving, because stopping meant remembering too much. She distracted herself with work, with the little details, making sure each cup had just the right amount of foam, remembering regular customers' favorite orders, pretending that in this cafe, she was part of something steady and predictable, unlike the chaos of her own life. On this particular day, the cafe felt busier than usual. People came in wearing coats against the cool wind outside, their voices filling the air with energy. Emily moved quickly, weaving through tables, placing menus, smiling, thanking customers. Though inside she felt a familiar heaviness, bills waiting at home, dreams she had put on hold, the ache of wanting more but not knowing how to reach it. She thought about how her life looked so small compared to the big city outside, skyscrapers, where powerful people made decisions, lives full of wealth and luxury, while she stayed here, scraping by. Emily sometimes wondered if her mother would be proud, if she would tell her to keep going, or gently remind her that life could change in a moment. Her mother had always believed in fate. She had often told Emily, things appear in your life for a reason, even when you don't see it at first. Emily tried to hold on to that thought, even on the hardest days, because it felt like the only rope tying her to hope. As the morning rush slowed, Emily stood behind the counter for a moment, wiping her hands on a towel, her eyes drifting to the door as the little bell above it jingled. She didn't know that in a few seconds her entire world was about to shift, that all the quiet grief she had kept buried would come rushing back to the surface, that the ring she thought was gone forever was about to appear before her eyes in the most unexpected way. For now she only felt the ordinary rhythm of her day, unaware that fate was already stepping closer, wrapped in the footsteps of someone she had never met. The cafe looked the same as it always did, small tables, sunlight spilling through the windows, the faint sound of jazz playing from the old speakers. Yet for Emily, this ordinary place was about to become the setting for something extraordinary. She didn't know it, but her story was about to begin, a story that would connect her past to her present, and her heart to a truth she never expected. She only knew she had to serve the next customer, just as she always did, unaware that destiny was quietly waiting for her to notice the bell above the cafe door jingled again, a soft cheerful sound that usually meant another customer had stepped inside. Emily looked up without thinking, her hands still busy with the tray she was carrying. and in that instant the cafe seemed to go quieter, as though the room itself was holding its breath. Standing at the entrance was a woman unlike anyone Emily had ever seen walk into this small corner cafe. She was tall, graceful, and her very presence seemed to shine. Her long gown was not the kind people wore casually. It looked like something pulled straight from a magazine. The fabric smooth and expensive, catching the sunlight from the window, and though she wore no crown, everything about her said she belonged to a different world, a world of luxury, wealth, and admiration. People at the tables turned their heads, whispers broke out as customers nudged one another, some even pulling out their phones as if they recognized her. She was the billionaire bride who had recently made the news, the kind of woman everyone read about but never expected to see standing right in front of them. Her hair was styled perfectly, her earrings sparkled as though made of stars, and her smile was calm, the kind of smile of someone who was used to eyes following her wherever she went. She walked with quiet confidence, as if she was used to being noticed, used to being admired, used to being called special. Emily felt her heart thump a little harder. It wasn't jealousy exactly. It was something else, a mix of awe and distance, like watching someone step out of a different life entirely. She thought of her own clothes, her plain uniform with the cafe's name stitched into the apron, her shoes scuffed from wear, and she wondered what it must be like to walk into a place knowing all eyes admired you, instead of barely noticing you. The billionaire bride looked around the cafe as if searching for a comfortable spot, and then she walked toward one of the tables by the window, sunlight touching her face and making her look even more radiant. Emily steadied herself and picked up her notepad, telling herself it was just another customer. No matter who she was, she had to be treated the same. Still, her palms felt slightly sweaty as she walked over, her steps careful, her mind strangely alert. She came to the table and stood with the usual polite smile, ready to ask for her order, but her eyes, against her will, were drawn down to the woman's hands resting gently on the table. Her fingers long and elegant, her nails carefully manicured, and there on her ring finger glowed a jewel that stopped Emily's breath for a second. At first it was just a flicker of light, the blue of the stone catching the sun, but then recognition struck her like a storm. She knew that ring. She had seen it in childhood. She had touched it with her small hands when she held her mother's fingers. She had stared at it as it sparkled while her mother cooked, worked, or tucked her into bed. It wasn't just any jewel. It was the very ring she had thought was gone forever. The antique sapphire and diamond ring her mother had cherished more than anything else. Emily's eyes widened, her chest tightened, and for a moment she forgot how to breathe. Her entire body froze. The billionaire bride looked up at her with a polite smile, waiting for her to speak, unaware of the storm that had just risen inside the waitress standing before her. Emily opened her mouth to ask the usual words, "What would you like today?" But they stuck in her throat. She was caught between the past and the present, her eyes refusing to leave the ring. Memories came rushing back in fast, painful waves, her mother's laughter, her promise that one day the ring would be Emily's, the bitter emptiness when it disappeared, and now here it was, sitting on the finger of a woman who lived in a completely different world. Emily felt her knees weaken slightly, her tray trembling in her hands. She forced herself to look away, to hide the shock that was boiling up. But it was almost impossible. Her heart raced. Her mind spun with questions. How did this woman get the ring? Who had given it to her? Was it stolen? Was it sold behind her back? Emily swallowed hard, trying to gather her composure, trying not to make a scene. Yet inside her thoughts screamed louder with each second she stared at that sapphire stone, shining under the cafe light. The bride, still smiling softly, tilted her head, her voice calm and kind as she said, "Is everything all right?" Her tone gentle, but Emily barely heard it. She struggled to force a polite nod, answering mechanically, scribbling the order though her mind wasn't even registering the words. She kept stealing glances at the ring, each glance stabbing deeper at the memory of her mother. She had never expected to see it again, and certainly not here, not like this, on the hand of a billionaire bride, who looked like she belonged in a palace, not a small cafe. Around them, the cafe buzzed with its normal sounds, cups clinking, people laughing, but to Emily it all felt muted, like she was underwater. Her world had narrowed to that one table, that one ring, and the painful truth that something from her mother's heart was sitting right in front of her yet out of reach. Her hands shook as she set down the glass of water, her eyes still drawn to the jewel as if it were calling to her, reminding her of the love she had lost, the questions she had buried. and the grief she had learned to carry alone. For Emily, the cafe no longer felt ordinary. It felt like the stage of some cruel play where fate had decided to test her. She told herself to breathe, to keep going, to finish the order like any other day. But deep inside she knew. This moment was not ordinary. This meeting was not an accident. The universe had placed her here for a reason. And the secret glittering on the bride's hand was going to change everything she thought she knew about her past and about her future. Emily stood by the table, her heart still racing, her hands clutching her notepad as if it were the only thing keeping her steady. She had served countless customers in this cafe. She had smiled at strangers and carried plates without thinking. But now every second felt heavy. Her eyes kept drifting back to the ring. That sapphire stone glowing like a piece of her past. It wasn't possible, she told herself. It couldn't be, yet no matter how she tried to reason, she knew in her bones it was her mother's ring. The same pattern of diamonds curling around the stone. The same tiny scratch on the band she remembered noticing as a little girl when she traced it with her finger. There was no mistake, it was the same one, and the shock of seeing it here made her feel dizzy. She opened her mouth to speak but no words came. Instead she stood frozen, her throat dry, her mind spinning with questions that had no answers. How did the bride get the ring? Had someone stolen it? Had someone sold it after her mother passed away? Her chest tightened as she thought of the years she had spent grieving not just her mother but the missing heirloom. The last piece of her family's love. Now it sat so casually on another woman's finger, worn like just another jewel. And that thought cut her deeper than she expected. The bride, unaware of the storm inside Emily, smiled kindly. She spoke again, asking if everything was all right. Her voice soft and curious. Emily forced a small nod. She tried to hide the trembling in her hands. She scribbled down the order but her pen scratched the paper too hard. Her mind wasn't focused on the words. It was focused only on that ring. She looked away quickly, afraid her eyes would reveal too much, but her chest still pounded, and her breaths came shallow as if she had run a long distance. The cafe around them buzzed with life, people chatting, spoons stirring, the coffee machine hissing. Yet for Emily all those sounds faded into the background. Her world had narrowed into this single moment, into the sharp ache of recognition. She remembered sitting as a child on her mother's lap, playing with the ring as her mother told her stories. She remembered how the sapphire caught the light of their small kitchen lamp, glowing blue as though it carried its own fire. She remembered her mother's words, "This ring has been in our family for generations, and one day it will be yours." Those words now rang in her ears like a broken promise. Emily felt the weight of grief pressing down, grief she thought she had buried years ago. She had told herself she had accepted the loss. She had told herself life had to move on. But seeing that ring again ripped open the wound. It was like her mother's memory had been stolen and handed to someone else. She bit the inside of her cheek to stop her emotions from spilling out in front of everyone. She couldn't cry here, she couldn't scream. She had to keep her role as a waitress, polite and invisible. But inside she burned with a desperate need to know the truth. The bride lifted the menu with delicate hands, her movements graceful, her smile never fading. She didn't notice the way Emily's eyes darted to the ring again and again. As if pulled by an invisible force, Emily's mind shouted questions she couldn't voice. How could this woman, so rich, so far removed from her world, possibly hold something that belonged to her mother? Did fate bring them together or was it some cruel accident? Emily's thoughts spun faster, each one cutting deeper than the last. When Emily finally walked away from the table to place the order, her steps felt unsteady. She hid behind the counter, gripping its edge tightly. Her coworker asked if she was all right, but she only nodded quickly, not trusting her voice. Her eyes flicked back to the bride at the window, the sunlight still catching the sapphire, making it shine brighter than ever, and each glimmer stabbed her heart with the reminder that it should have been hers, it should have been on her hand, a gift of her mother's love, not on a stranger's finger. Her mind tried to think logically. Perhaps it wasn't the same ring, perhaps it only looked similar, yet deep inside she knew better. She remembered every detail. The way her mother polished it carefully, the tiny nick on the side from years of wear, the unique setting of the diamonds. She wasn't imagining this, it was real. She felt both fury and sorrow mixing inside her, the kind of mix that made her stomach churn. She wanted to demand answers, to reach across the table and ask the bride directly, but fear held her back. Fear of making a mistake, fear of being dismissed, fear of causing a scene she couldn't control. So she served the coffee quietly, her hands still trembling slightly as she placed the cup on the table. Her eyes flicking once more to the ring, unable to stop themselves, she forced a smile, though her lips quivered, and she walked away, each step feeling heavier than the last. She tried to focus on other customers, but her mind kept circling back, again and again, to that ring and what it meant. She felt trapped in her own thoughts, as though the cafe had become a cage, and at the center of it sat the woman wearing the one thing that tied her to her mother's memory. Emily leaned against the counter for a moment, trying to steady her breathing. Her reflection in the glass window looked pale, her eyes wide with emotions she couldn't hide. She whispered to herself under her breath, "It's hers, it's really hers." And the words made her chest ache even more. She knew she couldn't let it go. She couldn't simply watch the woman leave with the ring and pretend it hadn't happened, no matter how afraid she felt, no matter how small she thought she was compared to this glamorous billionaire bride. Something inside her told her she had to act. She had to find out the truth. And so, even as she tried to finish her shift, Emily's mind was already preparing. Her heart was already pushing her toward the moment she would have no choice but to ask, no choice but to break the silence. Because the sight of her mother's ring had frozen her once. But it wouldn't keep her frozen forever. It had awakened something inside her, something fierce, something determined, and Emily knew, deep down, her life would never be the same after this day. Emily's mind could not calm down. No matter how many times she told herself to focus on work, the image of the ring kept pulling her back. Every sparkle on that sapphire was like a voice calling her name, dragging her into memories she thought she had carefully hidden away. She carried plates, she wiped tables, she smiled at customers, but her heart was somewhere else. Her heart was back in her childhood, back in the days when her mother's laughter filled their small home, back when life felt safe and whole. She remembered the way her mother would sit by the window in the evening, the soft light of the setting sun touching her face, her hands busy sewing or flipping through old books, and the ring always there, shining gently on her finger. Emily as a little girl would climb onto her mother's lap, her small fingers reaching out to play with the stone. She would twist it around, amazed at how the blue gems seemed to change colors under the light, sometimes deep ocean blue, sometimes soft sky blue. To her it looked like magic, and her mother would laugh and say, "This ring has seen many stories before ours, and one day it will see yours too." The ring was not just jewelry, it was a family heirloom, passed down from her grandmother to her mother, and promised to Emily. It carried weight, not just in value but in meaning. It was a reminder of love, of strength, of family. Her mother often said that no matter how hard life became, the ring was proof that beauty and love could survive through generations. Emily believed her, because when her mother wore it, everything felt unbreakable, as if nothing bad could touch them. But bad things did come. Her mother grew ill. Her strong hands that once cooked and sewed with such energy grew weaker. Her laughter became softer, and soon the house was filled not with joy but with the quiet heaviness of sickness. Emily tried to help. She made soup. She sat by her mother's bed. She whispered stories back to her as if she could return the comfort she had once received. And always she looked at the ring, glowing faintly on her mother's frail hand, like a symbol of hope that refused to fade. Then came the day when the ring disappeared. Emily remembered searching for it after her mother passed away, her heart desperate to hold on to that last piece of her. She looked in drawers, in jewelry boxes, in every corner of the house, but it was gone. She asked relatives. Some said they hadn't seen it. Some looked away as if they didn't want to answer. A few even suggested maybe it had been sold during the hard times, but no one gave her a clear truth, and Emily was left with emptiness. It felt like losing her mother all over again. Because the ring was more than gold and stone. It was memory, it was love, and now it was gone. Those nights after the funeral were the hardest. Emily would lie awake in bed, holding her pillow tight, tears soaking her cheeks, whispering to herself that maybe one day the ring would come back, maybe fate would return it. But as years passed, she stopped believing. She buried the hope deep inside and told herself to move on. Life was about survival now, not about dreams. The cafe became her world, small but steady, and the ring became a ghost in her mind, something too painful to think about for long. And yet here it was again, shining on the hand of a woman she had never met, a woman from a world so different from her own. Emily could almost hear her mother's voice in her head, gentle and warm, saying, "Things appear in your life for a reason." She had not thought about that phrase in so long, but now it echoed louder than the sounds of the cafe around her. She felt her chest ache as memory and reality tangled together, leaving her with a mix of longing and disbelief. Emily's hands trembled as she poured coffee for another customer, her mind replaying scenes of her mother's smile. The way she wore the ring proudly. The way she promised Emily it would be hers. She remembered birthdays when her mother hugged her close, the ring pressing softly against her skin as if sealing the bond between them. She remembered small moments too, like when her mother washed dishes and the sapphire caught droplets of water, sparkling even in ordinary light. Those small details filled her heart now, each one making the sight of the bride's ring more painful, more unbearable. She wondered if the bride knew the history of the ring, if she wore it only as a pretty jewel, unaware of the lives and stories it once belonged to. The thought stung Emily deeply, because to her it wasn't decoration, it was memory, and seeing it treated as just another piece of wealth felt like an insult to her mother's love. She pressed her lips together, trying to hold back tears, but her eyes still grew wet, and she quickly turned away so no one would notice. Her mind kept circling the same questions. How did the ring leave her family? Who had taken it? Who had passed it into the hands of strangers? She thought of old family friends, of relatives who had visited during her mother's illness. Suspicion flared inside her, mixing with sadness and anger. But she had no answers, only the painful truth that fate had placed the ring in front of her once again, daring her to reach for it or let it slip away forever. As she moved between tables, her steps heavy, she realized something deep inside. This was not just about jewelry, it was about her mother, about the bond they shared, about a promise that had been broken by time and circumstance. And now the universe had given her one more chance. She didn't know how or why, but she could not ignore it. She could not let the ring disappear from her life again. This time she would not stay silent. This time she would not bury her grief and move on. Something in her heart had shifted. Something strong and determined. She knew she had to act. The sapphire stone glowed again in the sunlight streaming through the cafe windows, and Emily's breath caught in her throat. It felt like her mother was reaching out to her across the years, whispering through that ring, calling her to be brave. Emily wiped her damp eyes quickly and took a deep breath. The memories had returned, the grief had sharpened, but alongside them was a spark of courage she had not felt in a long time. She was ready to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. No matter how powerful the person wearing the ring might seem, she was ready. Emily tried to continue her shift as if nothing had happened. But inside her chest a storm was rising. Every time she looked toward the window where the bride sat, her eyes landed on that ring, and the ache inside her grew stronger. It was not just an ache of sadness anymore, it was anger too, anger that something so precious had slipped from her life without explanation, anger that someone else wore it so casually. Unaware of the pain tied to it, she moved between tables with a polite smile, but her heart was restless. Her thoughts screamed louder with every passing minute. The question kept burning inside her. How did she get it? How could it be hers? She tried to reason with herself, telling herself to stay calm, telling herself it was not the right time. But the longer she waited, the heavier her chest felt, as if the air itself refused to let her breathe. She poured coffee with trembling hands, her fingers brushing against the hot cup, but she barely felt the heat. All she felt was the pull of that ring, her mother's memory sitting on the hand of a stranger. She remembered her mother's voice saying, "Don't be afraid to speak when your heart demands it." Those words echoed now, louder than the chatter of customers, louder than the hiss of the coffee machine, and she knew she could not keep silent much longer. The bride sat peacefully, her posture elegant, sipping her coffee as if she had all the time in the world. She looked out the window, completely unaware of the battle happening just a few feet away. Her calmness only made Emily more unsettled, because to her the ring was a treasure, a wound, a memory, while to the bride it seemed like just another piece of luxury. The unfairness pressed down hard on her. She clenched her fists at her side, trying to summon the courage she had buried for so long. Minutes stretched like hours. Every time Emily walked past the table her eyes caught the flash of the sapphire, and every time her throat tightened. She whispered to herself again and again, "Ask her, just ask her." But fear held her tongue. What if she was wrong? What if it wasn't the same ring? What if the bride laughed at her for even daring to question? She thought of the difference between them. One a billionaire bride admired by all, the other a simple waitress struggling to pay her bills. What right did she have to even speak to her beyond serving coffee? The thought made her shrink back. But then another voice rose inside her. The voice of her mother telling her that truth was never small, that love and memory were stronger than fear. Finally the weight became too much. Emily realized she could not let the moment slip away. If she stayed silent now, she would regret it for the rest of her life. The bride would leave, the ring would disappear once again, and she would be left with only questions and regrets. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. Her palms sweaty as she gripped her notepad, she walked slowly toward the table, each step heavier than the last, but also filled with a strange determination. She had to know, even if the answer broke her. The bride looked up as Emily approached, her eyes warm, her smile gentle. She seemed surprised to see the waitress come back so soon. Emily's mouth felt dry, her voice almost stuck in her throat. But she forced herself to speak, her words trembling but clear. "May I ask you something?" The bride tilted her head, curious, nodding politely. Emily's eyes flickered down to the ring again, and then back to the bride's face, her chest tight as she finally whispered, "Where did you get that ring?" For a moment silence hung in the air. The bride blinked, her smile fading slightly as she looked at Emily with confusion. She lifted her hand slowly, glancing at the sapphire as if seeing it through new eyes. Her brows furrowed, and she asked softly, "This ring, why do you ask?" Emily swallowed hard, her hands shaking as she clutched the tray close to her chest. She wanted to explain everything in one rush, to tell her about her mother, about the heirloom, about the years of loss, but the words tangled in her throat. Instead she managed to say, It belonged to someone very important to me." The bride leaned back slightly, her expression thoughtful. She was not defensive, not angry, only curious. She looked again at the ring, turning her hand slowly so the gem caught the light. "My fiancé gave it to me," she said finally, her voice calm. "He told me it was a rare piece, something he bought from a collector." Emily's stomach dropped. The words hit her like cold water. So it had been passed on, sold or stolen and then sold again. Her mind raced with possibilities, her heart aching, with the truth that someone, somewhere, had taken the ring from her family. The bride's eyes softened as she looked back at Emily, noticing the way her face had paled, the way her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Is it yours?" she asked gently, her voice holding no malice, only concern. Emily pressed her lips together, unable to answer directly, because she didn't know how much to say. She didn't want to sound desperate, but she also couldn't deny the truth. She nodded slightly, whispering, "It was my mother's." The words slipped out like a confession, raw and painful, and the moment they left her lips Emily felt both relief and sorrow. The cafe around them continued its rhythm, but for her the world had narrowed again, just her, the bride, and the ring shining between them. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if the bride would believe her, dismiss her, or laugh at the idea. But she knew one thing for certain: she had broken her silence. She had asked the question her heart demanded, and now there was no turning back. The bride looked at her with wide eyes, clearly surprised, her hands still resting on the table, the sapphire glowing as if it held its own secret. Emily stood there trembling, waiting for a response, her heart racing so loudly she could hear it in her ears. For the first time in years she felt both terrified and alive, because she had stepped out of fear, out of silence, into truth, and whatever came next would change everything. The air between them grew heavy, Emily's words still hanging in the space, her voice low and trembling as she admitted the truth. The bride blinked slowly, her eyes searching Emily's face, as if trying to read the story behind her shaking hands and watery eyes. For a moment the elegant woman said nothing. She simply touched the ring with her other hand, twisting it gently, her brows furrowed in thought. Then she leaned forward slightly, her voice soft but steady. "This ring, it means something to you, doesn't it?" Emily nodded, her throat tight, her voice barely a whisper as she said, "It was my mother's. She wore it every day, and after she passed, it disappeared." Her heart pounded as she confessed, part of her terrified she had said too much, but part of her relieved to finally speak what she had been carrying inside. The bride's eyes widened with surprise, but not anger. Instead there was a flicker of sympathy. She tilted her head, almost as if she could feel the pain behind Emily's words. The bride sighed gently, her fingers brushing the sapphire again. I didn't know," she said softly. "My fiancé gave it to me. He said he bought it from a private collector. He told me it was rare, something special. But I never imagined it belonged to someone else, to someone's family." Her voice was calm, but it carried a note of shock, as though she too was trying to make sense of it. Emily's breath caught, the words slicing through her, her mind spinning with images of how the ring might have slipped from her family's hands. stolen, sold, or traded in. Secret. She wanted to know who the collector was. She wanted to know how it had traveled from her mother's hand to this table. Emily swallowed hard, her voice breaking as she asked, Did he ever say where the collector got it? The bride shook her head slowly, her earrings catching the light as they moved. No, he only said it was a treasure he wanted me to have. He never spoke of its past, and I didn't ask. I suppose I was too blinded by the gift, by the thought of wearing something so beautiful. Her eyes lowered, almost ashamed, as if realizing that beauty could sometimes hide stolen history. Emily's chest ached, her mind torn between anger at the unknown hands that had taken the ring, and the strange kindness in the bride's tone. She had expected arrogance, maybe denial, but instead she saw sincerity. The woman across from her was not her enemy. She was another player in this tangled story, someone who had been given the ring without knowing its past. Emily studied her carefully. The way she held herself with grace but also honesty. The way her expression softened as she looked back at her. I can see it means a lot to you, the bride said gently. The way you looked at it. The way your voice changed. This isn't just jewelry for you, is it? Emily shook her head firmly, tears stinging her eyes. No, it isn't. It was part of my mother. She told me one day it would be mine, and when it disappeared I felt like I lost her all over again. Her voice cracked on the last words, and she quickly wiped at her cheek, embarrassed to show so much emotion in the middle of the cafe. But the bride didn't laugh, didn't scoff, she only nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting a quiet understanding. For the first time since she had seen the ring, Emily felt a flicker of relief, because at least she wasn't dismissed, at least her pain wasn't ignored. But the questions still burned inside her. Who had taken it? Who had sold it? And why? The bride's calm voice pulled her back from her spiraling thoughts. I never meant to wear something that belonged to another woman's heart, she said softly. If I had known, I would have asked more questions. I would have wanted to understand its story. I'm sorry. The words struck Emily deeply, not because they erased the loss, but because they were sincere. She hadn't expected an apology, not from someone who seemed so untouchable. Yet here it was, offered gently and without pride. Emily blinked at her, surprised by the honesty shining in her eyes. In that moment she realized the bride wasn't just a symbol of wealth and luxury. She was a human being, caught in a story she hadn't chosen. Still, the ache inside Emily didn't fade. Her hands gripped the tray tightly as she asked again. Do you think he would tell you more, your fiancé? Do you think he would explain how he got it? The bride hesitated, her lips pressing together as she thought. Then she nodded slowly. Perhaps. He loves me. He trusts me. Maybe if I ask him directly, he'll share the truth. Though I can't promise what that truth will be. Her voice was steady, but there was a shadow in her eyes, as though even she feared what they might uncover. Emily's heart skipped, a mix of fear and hope rising inside her. This was the first real step toward answers, toward the truth that had been hidden for so long. She looked at the bride, and for the first time she saw not just a stranger wearing her mother's ring, but someone who might help her, someone who could open the doors she herself could never reach. Please, Emily whispered, her voice trembling. Please find out, I just need to know. The bride gave a small, solemn nod, her hand resting on the table near the ring. I will, she said softly. You deserve to know where it came from. You deserve the truth. No family should lose something so precious without answers. Her words wrapped around Emily like a fragile thread of hope. Fragile because the truth might be painful, but strong because at least it was a path forward, a chance she never thought she'd have again. As the cafe buzzed with ordinary life around them, the two women sat in the quiet of their shared secret, one holding a ring heavy with memories, the other carrying a heart heavy with loss. Their worlds could not have been more different, yet in this moment they were connected by the sapphire's glow, by the story it carried, by the mystery it demanded to be solved. And as Emily stepped back from the table, her chest still tight but her spirit steadier, she knew one thing with certainty. The truth was coming, and with it, everything in her life was about to change. That night Emily could hardly sleep. She lay on her small bed staring at the ceiling, the image of the ring flashing again and again in her mind. She turned from side to side, clutching her pillow, her heart restless. For years she had told herself the ring was gone forever, and now, after one unexpected meeting, hope had returned, mixed with pain, mixed with fear. She thought about the bride's promise, her calm voice saying she would try to find the truth. Emily wanted to believe her, but doubt whispered at the edges of her mind. What if it led to nothing? What if the truth hurt more than the loss itself? The next day she returned to the cafe, her eyes heavy from lack of sleep, her body moving through the motions of work, but her mind far away. Every time the bell above the door jingled, she half expected to see the bride again. And late in the afternoon she did, the same elegant figure stepping inside, drawing curious glances from customers. But this time she came not as a mysterious stranger, but as someone carrying a secret, someone who had promised to uncover answers. The bride, Clara, as she now introduced herself, asked if they could speak privately, her tone gentle but serious. Emily led her to a quiet corner of the cafe after her shift. The evening light spilling across the wooden tables, Clara removed the ring carefully, placing it between them on the table, the sapphire glowing faintly in the fading sun. I asked my fiancé, she began softly. I wanted to know where he found it. I pressed him until he gave me details. And what I learned may not be easy for you to hear. Emily's hands clenched in her lap, her chest tight, but she nodded quickly. Please, I need to know. Her voice cracked with urgency. Clara sighed, her fingers brushing the edge of the ring. He bought it from a man who claimed it came from a family estate sale. He said the family was struggling with debts, that they sold off precious items to survive. My fiancé never questioned it. He trusted the story, but when I asked for names, for details, he grew uneasy. He said he didn't want to get involved in family matters. He said it wasn't his place. Emily's heart dropped, her mind racing. An estate sale, she whispered. That's impossible. My mother would never have sold it. She promised me it would be mine. Clara nodded slowly. I believe you, and I don't think she did. I think someone else must have taken it. Maybe a relative. Maybe someone close to her during her illness. Someone who had access when you were too young and too lost in grief to notice. The words cut deep, because they rang true. Emily remembered the days after her mother's death. The house full of visitors, relatives sorting through things, neighbors offering help. She had been numb, too broken to question anything, and in that silence, perhaps someone had taken advantage. Her stomach churned at the thought. Betrayal hiding among people she had trusted. She clenched her fists tighter, whispering, I need to know who. Clara looked at her with steady eyes. Then we'll find out together, she said firmly. I may not know your mother, but I can see what this ring means to you. I don't want to keep something that carries your family's story without understanding it. I will help you trace it back. I will not walk away from this. Something in Clara's voice eased Emily's chest. For the first time she felt she wasn't alone in carrying this weight. She nodded, her voice trembling. Thank you. The two women leaned closer, whispering plans like conspirators. Clara explained that her fiancé often mentioned the dealer who arranged rare pieces. If they could track him down, perhaps they could learn more. Emily felt nervous at the thought. Nervous about stepping into a world of wealth and trade far beyond her own. But determination burned brighter. She would face anything if it meant uncovering the truth. Over the next days Clara and Emily kept in touch, meeting quietly in cafes and small restaurants. Clara bringing notes, Emily bringing questions. They pieced together small details, names half remembered, locations hinted at. Emily marveled at the strange bond forming between them. Two women from different worlds. One a billionaire bride, one a struggling waitress, yet united by a single ring. United by a mystery that demanded answers. Each meeting made Emily feel stronger, less afraid, as if her mother's voice was guiding her forward. There were moments of doubt, moments when Emily wondered if she was chasing shadows, but then Clara would remind her. Truth has a way of surfacing, we just have to keep pushing. Those words gave her courage, courage to look back into painful memories, courage to face the possibility of betrayal within her own family. She thought of her mother often, imagining her smile, imagining her saying, Don't give up, Emily, keep going. And each time she pushed forward, driven by love, by memory, by the promise of closure. Finally Clara managed to arrange a meeting with the man her fiancé had dealt with, a well-dressed collector who claimed to specialize in rare jewelry. Emily's heart pounded as she heard the plan. Part of her terrified, part of her eager. She knew this was the path. This was where answers waited. Clara squeezed her hand gently before they left the cafe. No matter what we find, you won't be alone in this. Her words were soft but strong, and Emily felt her chest tighten with gratitude. As they prepared to step into the next chapter of the search, Emily looked once more at the ring glowing faintly on the table between them. It no longer felt like just a reminder of loss. It felt like a guide, a key pulling her toward the truth. She thought of her mother, of her promise, and she whispered silently, "I'm coming for it, I'll bring it home." The sapphire sparkled under the cafe lights, as if answering back, as if her mother's spirit was walking beside her, urging her forward into the unknown. The day of the meeting arrived, and Emily felt her stomach twist with nerves. She stood outside a tall glass building in the heart of the city, a place that seemed far too grand for someone like her. The doors shimmered under the sunlight, polished clean. The people walking in and out dressed in suits and silk. She clutched her worn bag tighter, feeling small in this world of wealth. Beside her stood Clara, calm and elegant as always, her hand resting gently on Emily's arm, her voice steady. "Don't be afraid, you deserve to know the truth." Those words gave Emily strength. She nodded and took a deep breath, following Clara inside. The collector sat in an office lined with shelves of shining objects, necklaces, rings, watches, each locked behind glass, treasures from different families, different times. Emily's eyes flickered over them uneasily, wondering how many of these pieces had stories hidden behind them, stories of love, loss, or betrayal. The man behind the desk smiled politely, his suit perfectly pressed, his hair silver but neat, his eyes sharp as he welcomed them. Clara spoke first, introducing herself, her voice graceful but firm. Then she gestured toward Emily. "We came to ask about this ring." She placed the sapphire gently on the table, and the man's eyes flicked to it. A brief pause before his polite smile returned. Emily's heart hammered as she leaned forward, her voice trembling but steady enough. "It belonged to my mother. Years ago it disappeared, and now I find it here, on the hand of someone who had no idea where it came from. I need to know how you got it. I need to know who gave it to you." The man adjusted his tie, his smile not fading but his eyes showing a flicker of unease. He cleared his throat. "Miss, many items pass through my hands. Families come to me, collectors, sellers. I cannot possibly remember each story." His words were smooth, but Emily felt the truth hiding behind them. Clara's eyes narrowed, her voice sharper now. "This is not just a trinket. This is an heirloom. You know where it came from. So please don't insult us by pretending you don't." The man hesitated, tapping his fingers on the desk, then finally sighed, his voice quieter. "Very well. The ring was brought to me years ago by a woman. She said it came from her late sister's belongings. She claimed she needed money, that the family would not mind. I paid her. I had no reason to question it further." Emily's breath caught, her mind spinning. A woman, a late sister's belongings. Her heart sank as realization dawned. It must have been her mother's own sister, her aunt, someone who had been close during the illness, someone who had hugged Emily at the funeral, someone she had trusted. Betrayal suddenly stung her like fire. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "My aunt." The man glanced at her, nodding slowly. Yes, that was the name she gave. She seemed desperate. "I thought I was helping." But Emily shook her head, anger and grief mixing inside her. "Helping?" she whispered bitterly. "You helped her steal from me, from my mother's memory." Clara reached for her hand, squeezing it gently, grounding her before her emotions spilled too far. Emily breathed hard, trying to calm herself. The truth had cut deep, but at least it was no longer hidden. Clara's voice filled the silence, firm but kind. "This ring belongs to her family. It should never have left their hands. I think you know that." The man shifted uncomfortably, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps I should have asked more questions. But what's done is done. The ring has traveled far since then." Emily's eyes fixed on the sapphire, shining between them on the polished desk, and her voice, though broken, came out strong. "I want it back. It belongs to me, to my mother, to our family. Please let me take it home." For a long moment the room was quiet. The man's sharp eyes studied Emily, and then, perhaps moved by the determination in her trembling voice, perhaps out of guilt, he leaned back and sighed, "Very well. It is yours. I will not keep what does not belong to me." He pushed the ring gently across the desk toward her. Emily's hands shook as she picked it up, the cool metal pressing against her skin, the sapphire glowing softly as if it recognized her touch. Tears blurred her vision as she slipped it onto her finger. For the first time since her mother's death she felt something like wholeness, like a piece of her heart had been returned. Clara smiled warmly, her voice soft. "It looks right on you, as if it has found its way home." Emily looked at her, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you. I couldn't have done this without you." Clara shook her head gently. No, you did this because you were brave enough to ask, brave enough to face the truth. Emily's throat tightened, emotions rising so strong she could barely speak. She pressed her fingers to the ring, whispering softly, "I missed you, Mom." The words private but powerful, and in that moment she felt her mother's presence so close, like a warm embrace around her soul. As they left the office together, stepping back into the city streets, Emily felt lighter. The sky above seemed brighter, the noise of the world less sharp. She glanced at Clara, who walked beside her with quiet dignity. Two women from different worlds bound by one shared journey. Emily realized that fate had not been cruel after all. It had brought her the chance to reclaim what was lost, and even more, it had given her a new friend, someone who believed in her when she felt small and powerless. That evening back in her small apartment, Emily sat by the window just as her mother once had, the ring shining faintly in the dim light. She held her hand up, watching the sapphire glow, tears slipping down her cheeks, but this time they were not only of sorrow. They were of peace, of closure, of love. She whispered into the quiet room, "I brought it back, Mom, it's home again." And for the first time in years, Emily felt free, the ache in her chest no longer heavy, the silence no longer empty. Because the ring was not just on her hand, it was back in her heart where it had always belonged.